Yo guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today I'm going to be ranking the best prospect on every single NHL team. Now of course, the 2020 draft is over and done with, and the prospect pools throughout the NHL are pretty much finalized, so we can take a look at not just the best prospects on every team, but the best prospect on every team as well. So, who do I see as the best prospects right now in the National Hockey League? And who do I see as the number one guy for every single NHL team? Watch till the end for all my picks and my prospect content. And of course, hit that big red subscribe button for prospect content and rankings content just like this one. Now, usually in these one for every team videos, we usually start with the Anaheim Ducks and then work our way down to the Winnipeg Jets. But just like in the draft mistake video, I thought we might as well start with Winnipeg and then work our way down to the Anaheim Ducks. Reverse alphabetical order, do something a little bit different. So we're going to start out with the Winnipeg Jets today and their number one prospect right now in 2020, and that is the man himself, Cole Perfetti. Now, Cole Perfetti is the obvious choice here, but Winnipeg still has some pretty great prospects besides that. Guys like Heinola, Sandberg, guys like Christian Vesalainen, who will be great NHL players, but Cole Perfetti definitely leads that group. He's a guy that I could see becoming at least a top 6 winger or center in the NHL, and the thing is, I think he is more suited for the wing. But in Winnipeg, where they could use a second-line center for the future, I think Cole Perfetti could be built and could be rounded out to be that guy for them right behind Mark Scheifele. But his offensive skill is apparent. Not the greatest skating in the world, but when you have the IQ that Cole Perfetti does, it really doesn't matter too much. Then going on to the Washington Capitals, their best prospect is Connor McMichael. Now, some people would say Hendrix Lapierre, but I think Connor McMichael is just more far along and might even have more potential than a guy like Lapierre, which is pretty hard to do. But Connor McMichael has definitely turned a lot of heads, including mine after this past OHL season. He's a guy that improved in a lot of key things, and inconsistency as well was a big issue for me. He definitely improved that over the course of the season, and that's a guy that I think will be a top 6 player for the Washington Capitals. Whether he hits that first line mark, we'll see, but that's a player who's going to be a great impact player for the Caps in no time at all. Then going on to the Vegas Golden Knights, their best prospect for me is Peyton Krebs. Now, this is if you have Cody Glass as a graduate, which I do. To me, Peyton Krebs is definitely the next in line, though, and definitely one of the more underrated prospects, I think, in the league. That's a guy that, although has dealt with some injury issues, I think when healthy is just a feisty player, a super hard player to play against, and has some pretty nifty skill at that. He's a little more of a project compared to some of the players drafted around him, but when you get him in the late 10s in 2019, I think that was one of the best picks of the first round back then. Then going on to the Vancouver Canucks, and my best prospect for them in Vasily Podkolzin. Now, Podkolzin has had an interesting start to the season, hasn't really got his way into KHL, but he's barely been playing and then got demoted to the VHL. It seems like a lot of Canucks fans have practically gave up on him, which if you say Nils Hoglander is the best, I wouldn't exactly blame you because he is freaking awesome. But to me, Vasily Podkolzin has the most potential and one of the best potentials of any prospect I'll talk about in today's video. His skill is just sweet, and with his size, he could become one of the better power forwards in the NHL. He will take some more time, and he is a project, but the talent is certainly there. Now going on to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and this one was tough. Because you got Rasmus Sandin, you got Nicholas Robertson, you got Rodion Amira, potentially. Honestly, he could be the number one guy for Toronto. But to me, right now, it is Nicholas Robertson. To me, he was a guy that went so underrated in 2019. I had him in my early 20s in the draft, or at least in my rankings. He went in the second round. I thought that was an absolute steal, and lo and behold, he would have a terrific season with the Peterborough Petes and would just dominate. I think that's a guy that will take some more time than people do expect, but he suited up in the bottom 6 for the Leafs and looked pretty solid versus a team like Columbus, which is pretty smothering defense there over there. And I think that he's a guy that, if he's given the time next season, could produce pretty solidly and be right at home on that Leafs offense. Now going on to the Tampa Bay Lightning, I have Cal Foote, one of the better defensive prospects in this list, but to be honest, it's not really as good as some other prospects on this list. I think Cal Foote is a guy that will be probably a middle pairing, solid offensive player. Nothing much more than that, but Tampa doesn't exactly need a number one prospect right now. Last time I checked, they're doing pretty decently by themselves. Then going on to the St. Louis Blues, they have Hobey Baker winner in Scott Perunovich. Now another defensive prospect here, and a guy that's obviously risen a lot over the past couple of seasons. Perunovich is a guy that I'm not really sure where he fits in St. Louis right now, but that's still a player who I could see becoming a middle pairing guy, probably more in that like 4th, 5th spot in terms of the NHL lineup. but I do like Perunovich's overall game. That's a guy who I think will be an impact player for St. Louis, and St. Louis can definitely turn him into something in the NHL. Then going on to the San Jose Sharks, one of the most polarizing prospects in this list, that being Ryan Merkley. Now, you could have Ozzy Weisblatt as their pick, which is another great player and another great prospect. But to me, Ryan Merkley has the most potential out of any Sharks prospect. And even though there's been some concerns over his attitude, the just pure potential and the pure talent is so fun to watch. He's a little bit of a glass cannon, but offensively he has so much potential. And honestly, that's a team that already has a lot of those kind of players offensively. So I think Ryan Merkley will kind of fit at home in San Jose, and I think eventually will be a pretty solid offensive power play specialist for them. Now going on to the Pittsburgh Penguins, I have Samuel Poulin, one of my favorite prospects on this list. A guy who I thought also went pretty underrated in the last draft. Looked pretty good in the QMJHL last year. That's a very smart, very low-key player, but still has some pretty good skill and some pretty good speed. And that's a player who I think will fit right in a middle six for Pittsburgh. Might not get a first-line spot, but I think will be pretty great in all situations. Now going on to the Philadelphia Flyers, I have center prospect in Morgan Frost. And Morgan Frost is a guy that also kind of goes a little bit underrated because some people just kind of forget about him, but he still has some awesome offensive talent. Even though he is more on the older side of these prospects, he's a guy who I could totally see becoming a top six center. Maybe not in the first line, but as a second line, even center, I could see him being a great fit for Philly. Even though they're kind of stacked in center right now and he kind of has to be forced to play wing, that still has a lot of talent to go, and I feel like Morgan Frost will do great with Philly and the Flyers in the future. Now going on to the Ottawa Senators and Tim Stützle. And obviously the third overall pick in the draft will be the Ottawa Senators' #1 prospect, but I think Tim Stützle absolutely deserves to be. He's a guy that I still think should play on the wing, but I think will do great with the Ottawa Senators. That's one of the most skilled prospects in the draft. Great speed, great overall skating, and an offensive tool set that I think will do great at the NHL level. It might not happen this next season, but I think eventually Tim Stützle will become one of the better Germans of all time and a very productive NHL player. Now going on to the New York Rangers, and of course it has to be Alexis Lafreniere. Now as we talked about in the top 10 Rangers prospects video, of course Lafreniere is #1. There's really not too many surprises here. He to me is the best prospect on the planet behind or in front of Kirill Kaprizov, but Lafreniere just has everything. Everything you'd want in a great NHL player and winger, he brings that, and I think we'll bring that next season to the New York Rangers. Now going on to the New York Islanders, and to me, I have their goaltender in Ilya Sorokin. Now, he might be a little bit old for some people, but he's 24 or 25 and around the same age as Igor Shesterkin, so it's not a huge difference. But to me, Ilya Sorokin, if it weren't for Shesterkin, would probably be one of, if not the best goaltending prospect in the NHL besides Yaroslav Askarov. But Sorokin just has all the tools, great size, great athleticism, and that's a guy that I could see becoming one of the better goaltenders and the starter for New York. I mean, who knows? Maybe Varlamov still takes that spot, but I think Sorokin will definitely surprise some people. Then going on to the New Jersey Devils and Alexander Holtz. Now, of course, Jack Hughes has already graduated, and Ty Smith will be still a pretty decent pick, but to me, Alexander Holtz brings a lot of what New Jersey needs, a fantastic blistering shot, and that's a guy who will be a premier goal scorer. Might not be anything more than that, and I don't know if you should expect too much more, but the goal scoring is what he brings, and that's freaking amazing. Goals are pretty okay in my book. That might be controversial, we'll see. Now going on to the Nashville Predators and their best prospect in Yaroslav Askarov, aptly mentioned. Now Philip Tomasino is also a pretty great prospect. He would definitely be my #2, but Askarov just brings so much potential in the crease, and Nashville could definitely use a guy like that. I think that's a player that might be NHL ready just in the next few years and could lace him up as soon as like 21, 22, kind of in the same trajectory as Carter Hart if he goes away from Russia. But that's a player that the athleticism is insane. His hockey IQ is awesome, and that's a player that's just a highlight reel while also being very responsible in net. Just overall being exactly what you want in a goaltender, and I think he will be a great starter for Nashville in the coming future. Then going on to Montreal and Cole Caufield. Again, there is some other good prospects there like Romanov, Norlinder, but Cole Caufield really does take the cake for me. In terms of goal scoring, it's just so fluid, it's so simple, but he gets it done. Really, the size, it's not too much of a factor for me. He really uses that to his benefit sometimes, and he really has rounded out his overall game a lot more. I think defensively, away from the puck, there is a long ways to go, but the goal scoring is already there. The offensive potential is there, and I think that's a player that will be a top 6 power play winger and just dominate that goal scoring in the future. Then going on to the Minnesota Wild, and of course, my boy, Kirill Kaprizov. And Kaprizov is a guy that I think will contend for the Calder Trophy next season. Is more on the older side, but still a player who I think can absolutely dominate for the Minnesota Wild and could potentially be the star they have always wanted. Now, I'm not sure if he gets up to that level, but in the future, when you have Kevin Fiala, Marco Rossi, and Kirill Kaprizov, that's a line that will absolutely destroy worlds, and I honestly cannot even wait. And I'm a Dallas Stars fan, but all those players are freaking amazing. Then going on to the LA Kings, and of course, Quinton Byfield. Now, Quinton Byfield is, of course, the obvious choice, but he really does bring almost elite talent to the LA Kings. I would say almost definitely elite talent to the LA Kings. That's a player that I think could totally become a first-line center and really be dominant at it too, and be one of the better centers in the NHL. He has the potential, to me, to become one of the best at the NHL level with his size, with his overall ability. If he's able to work on that a little bit more, the offensive game, the skating is also amazing at his size and at his age, that I think he's going to be a dominant player for LA. Now going on to the Florida Panthers, and also another one of my boys in Anton Lundell, and he has been scorching everything on this earth over these past few weeks in the Liga, and that's a guy that has really worked on his skating, and it is obviously apparent. And that's really the only kind of complaint I had with Lundell, is that he wasn't too fast, but his skating was already good in the edge work. It was already very fluid. He just needed a little more explosiveness, and we've seen that a lot more in the Liga. His defensive game is awesome. It's superb, and I think that's a guy that will win Selke trophies, and with the way his skating has progressed, could be a lot better offensively than some people do expect. Then going on to Edmonton, and Evan Bouchard, another great defensive prospect, really has made some big strides since his draft year. I think his skating has definitely improved. His defensive game has definitely improved in the A, and I think that's a guy that for Edmonton will be a top 4 D-man. Then going on to Detroit, and Lucas Raymond. He also has gotten off to a pretty solid start in the SHL and has gotten better and better, I think, as the season went on. But Lucas Raymond is a guy that, in terms of potential, in terms of creativity, can become, in my opinion, the best player on the Detroit Red Wings. And forward-wise, definitely, in my opinion, even though Dylan Larkin is still pretty good. To me, Lucas Raymond really brings it all offensively. Awesome IQ, amazing anticipation, and that's a player who I think will be a first-line guy for Detroit. Then going on to my Dallas Stars, and my pick going to Thomas Harley. Now, Maverick Bourque is also a good choice. Same thing with a guy like Jake Ottinger. But Thomas Harley really is the guy in the Dallas system. I wasn't really skeptical of the pick when it was made, but I felt like there were better players available. Guys like Tomasino, I think, would have been pretty fun to see. But I do think Thomas Harley has made some big strides since his draft year. Last year in the OHL looked pretty great all around. And I think that's a player that is just solid in pretty much everything. He doesn't really stand out in too much, but that's a player that gets the job done and offensively has a lot of skill to boot. Then going on to the Columbus Blue Jackets, definitely one of the weaker prospects on this list, but I wouldn't disrespect Liam Foudy too much because he kind of burned me in the playoffs with how he was playing. I think Liam Foudy is an awesome skater, great speed, and I think will be a pretty solid middle six player for the Blue Jackets. Probably nothing more than that, but as a power play option, power play energizer, I think he brings a lot of value. Then going on to the Colorado Avalanche, and honestly, it's pretty much tied between Bowen Byram and Alex Newhook. I would still go Bowen Byram with the potential, but man, is Alex Newhook looking good. So I'm just going to say both of them. Why can't we love both? I mean, that's just basically how I'll go with it, to be honest. Then going on to the Chicago Blackhawks and defenseman Ian Mitchell. And definitely one of my favorite prospects defensively on this list. Mitchell offensively is a beast, and I think will bring a lot of value for the Blackhawks soon. It might even be as soon as next season. I mean, he's done so well in the NCAA recently. That's a player that is also improving in his overall game, and I think Ian Mitchell is definitely one of the more underrated prospects out there. Could make an impact as soon as next season, too. Now on to the Carolina Hurricanes and Seth Jarvis. And Seth Jarvis became one of my favorite prospects over the course of this last season and ended up being selected top 15. That's a player, though, that I think is going to be so fun on Carolina, and I think it's a perfect fit on that right wing. That's a player that has so much offensive talent, a blistering shot, amazing passing, great overall offensive IQ. The defense could use some work, but when you got the offensive game that Seth Jarvis does, it doesn't matter too much. And he is a winger, so I don't think it'll be too much of a problem. Down on to the Calgary Flames, and this one I kind of went back and forth on because you could say Dylan Dubé, but with the way that Juuso Välimäki is playing in the Liga so far, I kind of have to pick him right now. Now, Juuso Välimäki was a guy that was injured for most of last season, didn't really get too much playing time, but is healthy now, playing in the Liga, has been absolutely brilliant, and it's obvious that he's worked on a lot of things offensively. Defensively, I still think there's a long ways to go, and that's still kind of my big problem with him, but offensively, he brings some great offensive talent, some great passing skills too, and that's a guy that I could see being a 5th, 4th power play defenseman for the Flames. Now on to the Buffalo Sabres and Dylan Cozens. And Dylan Cozens is another guy that has made some big strides, but to me definitely is Buffalo's best prospect. To me right now, Dylan Cozens is kind of tricky because I'm not sure how to pinpoint when he gets up to the NHL level. That's a guy that probably will need another year in the junior leagues, but I still think is a guy that can become a middle six, potentially even a second line forward in the NHL, be a second line center potentially behind Jack Eichel, and do pretty well at it. He might be more suited to wing, but with them going for Jack Quinn, I think they're pretty hell-bent on Cozens being that center for them. Now on to the Boston Bruins and Jack Studnicka. And Studnicka is a guy that I have loved over this past year. To me, is definitely Boston's best prospect. After his AHL campaign, definitely opened some eyes, including mine. And I went back and watched him tape, and the guy is just ridiculous sometimes. At his age, he's doing things that are just fundamentally strong. I think that's a player that even if he doesn't play center for the Bruins, I think will be a very strong middle six winger for them, bring some great speed, bring some great skating, and that's a guy that I think will bring some great energy to that Boston Bruins forward group. Now on to the Arizona Coyotes, and let's just not talk about Mitchell Miller, but talk about a pretty great prospect in Barrett Hayton. Now Victor Soderstrom is another guy that could be considered here, and he's definitely a worthy choice, but to me, Barrett Hayton does have the potential to be that top six center, and Arizona could definitely use another player like that can bring the offensive skill that Barrett Hayton brings. Now again, it's Arizona, so I'm a little bit concerned he gets kind of trapped in that defensive game, but I do think Barrett Hayton is a guy that, in the right system, can provide some great talent on a second line, great power play ability as well, and be a pretty awesome offensive player to watch, which I'm hoping Arizona embraces. Then on to the Anaheim Ducks, last but not least, in Trevor Zegras. And he is one of my favorite prospects in the NHL out there. Ever since before he was drafted, I just loved watching his game. One of the premier playmakers of this list as well. A guy that was dominant in the NCAA, dominant in the World Juniors, and I think will be a great player for the Anaheim Ducks. Might not be a #1 center, but I think is one of the better bets on this list to make a first line and be very productive. I think for the Anaheim Ducks, they got themselves quite the steal at 9th overall. But that'll be it for today, guys. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, join the Grab Gang. Make sure you let me know down in the comments down below, though, what do you agree and disagree with, and who do you see as the best prospect on your favorite NHL team? Make sure you share this video with your friends, get it out there, and click on this card for all of my hockey prospect content right on one playlist. I love you. No, seriously, I love you. And the Rankings King will see you in the next video or stream. Goodbye.